Sometime in the last 10 minutes, your hand moved toward your phone. You probably did not notice it happen. There was nothing new on it. You checked anyway. That reflex is about 15 years old. The thing it is treating is about 2 million. In 2014, psychologists put volunteers alone in a plain room. No phone, no book, nothing on the walls. 15 minutes and one instruction. Sit here and think. The room had one button. Pressing it delivered a real electric shock. Every volunteer had already felt that shock once before the study started. Most of them had said they would pay money never to feel it again. 2/3 of the men shocked themselves anyway. A quarter of the women did. One man pressed the button 190 times in 15 minutes. 15 minutes. That is shorter than the queue you stood in yesterday. Now hold that next to the people you came from. Their working day ran somewhere between 2 and 6 hours. The rest of it was empty. Every day, for 300,000 years. They had no button. So what did they actually do with all that time? And why can we not do it anymore? Here is the root. How empty those hours really were. The fight over that number. What got built inside them. The evening fire. The day leisure got a timetable. And the bill. Let's go. Start with the itch itself, because it is not what people assume. Boredom is not tiredness. It is not sadness either. The researchers who measure it describe something much narrower. You want your attention occupied. Nothing on offer will occupy it, and you are aware of both things at once. That is a hunger signal. Hunger says, go and find food. Thirst says, go and find water. This one says, go and find something worth attending to. It is an alarm. And alarms only make sense if you can act on them. For almost all of our history, you acted. The signal fired, you got up, and you did something about it. Now the signal fires and your thumb answers it in under a second. Now the word, because the word is suspiciously young. Boredom enters English in the middle of the 1800s. Dickens uses it in Bleak House in 1852. The verb to bore is older, from the 1760s. Before that, the language barely reaches for it. Sit with the timing. The word arrives in the same century as the factory shift and the public clock. English got a name for the feeling at the exact moment it started being manufactured at scale. Now the free time, because this is where the numbers get strange. In the 1960s, Richard Lee lived with the Ju/Hwansi in the Kalahari and did something obvious that nobody had bothered to do. He timed them. He recorded who went out, for how long, and what they carried back. Subsistence work came to about 12 to 19 hours a week, around 2 hours and 9 minutes a day. 2 hours a day, in a semi-desert. Surveys of the Hadza in Tanzania land in a similar place, roughly 4 to 6 hours a day out foraging and less than that in good seasons. Anthropologists gave the idea a name, the original affluent society, meaning affluent in the only currency that existed, time. Now the honest correction, because that picture has been oversold for 60 years, Lee counted the walking and the digging. He did not count everything that happened back at camp. Food does not arrive ready. Nuts have to be cracked. Hides have to be scraped, worked, and softened. Points chip and get re-napped over and over. Add processing, tool repair, and camp work, and the total climbs steeply. Some recounts push it past 40 hours a week, which is your week. So the 4-hour paradise is soft. Do not repeat it at parties. The honest version is smaller and still remarkable. The work was hard, and it was finished. Nobody carried it home. There was no evening shift. There was an evening. And that evening is where the best data in this whole subject sits. Almost nobody quotes it. Polly Wiessner spent decades with the Ju/Hwansi, and she did something clever. She wrote down what people talked about, and when. Daytime conversation went in one column, firelight conversation went in another. Then she counted. Daylight talk was practical and sharp. Complaints, arguments over who got what, gossip about who was pulling their weight. A third of it was straight economics. Then the light drops, and the group gathers at the coals. 81% of night conversation was stories. Read that again. 4/5, not planning, not complaints. Stories about journeys, ancestors, other camps, animals, people who had gone. Same humans, same day, different fire. That is what the empty hours were for. The group had a slot with nothing in it, and they filled it with the only content available anywhere on Earth: each other. You have that same slot. It sits between dinner and sleep, and it is roughly the same length it has always been. It is now filled by a machine that does not know you exist. And storytelling was not a hobby out there. It was a job with a measurable return. Researchers working with the AGTA in the Philippines asked hundreds of people a simple question: who would you most want in your camp? Good storytellers were named more often than the best hunters and the best fishers. In camps with more storytellers, people shared more in cooperation games, and the storytellers themselves averaged about half a child more than everyone else. Read that again. In a foraging society, being interesting paid better than being useful. Now the objects, because empty hours leave evidence in the ground. At Hohlefels in southern Germany, Nicholas Kennard and his team found a flute. It is cut from the wing bone of a griffon vulture, 21 centimeters long, 5 finger holes. It is around 40,000 years old. Somebody sat down with a bird bone and worked out where the holes go. Nobody has ever been fed by a flute. Replicas of it play a recognizable scale. There are recordings online. It sounds like a flute, because it is one. And it is not a one-off. Another cave in the French Pyrenees, Isteritz, has produced more than 20 flute fragments from the same site. 20. That is not one eccentric with a bird bone. That is a habit, running for thousands of years, in a place where winter lasts half the year. From the same handful of caves comes something much harder to explain away. The Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel. 31 centimeters of mammoth ivory, carved into a standing figure with the head of a cave lion. An experimental archaeologist rebuilt it using flint tools and timed himself. Around 400 hours. 400 hours, in the Ice Age, on a statue of an animal that does not exist. Put that in labor terms. 400 hours is 10 of your working weeks. Somebody in that group ate food they did not go out and get for months so that this could exist. That is the real finding. Not the carving, the permission. The habit runs older than either object. At Blombos Cave in South Africa, there is a flake of stone with 9 cross-hatched lines drawn on it in ochre. 73,000 years old. It is a doodle. It is the oldest one we have. Ostrich eggshell beads run back past 50,000 years, and they are sorted by size and by pattern. Somebody was choosing. Somebody had a preference. At Mazin in Ukraine, around 20,000 years ago, somebody painted mammoth bones with red ochre and struck them. The wear marks are still there. An antler hammer lay beside them. The site is read as a percussion set, a drum kit made of mammoth, and a small bone disc from Logerie Basse in France has an animal standing on one side and lying down on the other. Thread it, spin it, and the animal moves. 14,000 years ago, somebody invented animation for no reason at all. Then there is the art you have to work to reach, which is the expensive kind. Chauvet in France is around 36,000 years old and carries over 400 animals. Lascaux is around 17,000 years old, with roughly 600 painted animals and 1,500 engravings. Painted where? Look up. Parts of Lascaux are on a ceiling nobody can reach standing. There are sockets cut into the rock along the walls. They held beams. A platform was built in the dark so a person could lie on it and paint a bull. More than 100 stone lamps came out of that cave. Fat lamps with wicks. Somebody had to render the fat and carry it in. So before a single line goes on the wall, the group has spent days on scaffolding, pigment, and light, underground, in winter. And there is the cheapest mark of all, which is everywhere. At El Castillo in Spain, a plain red disc on the wall is at least 40,800 years old. Beside marks like it, in cave after cave on 3 continents, you get hands. A palm flat on the rock, pigment held in the mouth and blown around it. Lift the hand and the shape stays. Nobody needed that. It feeds nobody. It is the oldest version of writing your name on a wall, and it happens in Spain, in Indonesia, and in Argentina without anyone comparing notes. And on Sulawesi, in Indonesia, a painted scene of a pig and 3 small figures has been dated to at least 51,000 years. That is the oldest story we have, and somebody spent a slow afternoon on it. You were not designed to be entertained. Read that again because it is the center of this whole video. Nothing in your head has a slot for content that arrives on a schedule. What you have is a search system with an alarm bolted to it. The alarm fires when your attention has nothing to bite on. It is supposed to be unpleasant. That is the entire mechanism. For 300,000 years, there were only 3 ways to switch it off. Make something, learn something, or talk to somebody. So the itch built things. It had no other exit. Now watch what happens when the empty hours stop being empty and start being scheduled. Sit down. Farming. A farming year has a shape. Sow, wait, harvest, wait. And the waiting is a new kind of waiting. It is long, it is indoors, and it comes with a granary you have to sit next to. This is exactly when board games appear. In the royal graves at in southern Iraq, there is a playing board of 20 squares, inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli, around 4,500 years old. We even have the rules. A Babylonian tablet from much later spells out how it worked. People kept playing that game for 2,000 years. In Egypt, Senate boards turn up from roughly 5,000 years ago, painted on tomb walls, packed in with people who apparently wanted to keep playing. At Shari-Sukta in Iran, a board came up with 60 pieces and a set of dice. And under all of it sits the cheapest gaming piece ever invented, the ankle bone of a sheep. It has 4 usable faces and it lands flat. Polished, drilled, and marked examples turn up from Greece to Mongolia, in graves, in temples, and under house floors, for thousands of years. No craftsman required. You eat the animal, and the gaming piece is already inside it. Before farming, almost nothing like this survives. After farming, it is everywhere, in every region, fast. That is the first machine humans ever built whose only job is to consume time. 20 squares, 2 players, an afternoon gone. We have been refining that machine ever since. It has got very good. Some of you are thinking this is all nonsense, that nobody with a spear and no roof was ever bored, because staying alive filled every waking hour. Fair question. It is the standard answer. It does not survive contact with the objects. A lion carved from ivory is 400 hours of nothing useful. Survival pressure does not produce that. Survival pressure produces sharper points. And there is a second problem with the busy theory. Waiting is most of hunting. Sitting above a waterhole for 6 hours. Tracking a wounded animal for 2 days. Waiting out 3 days of rain under an overhang with 4 other people and no exit. That is not a life with no empty time. It is a life stuffed with it. The empty time simply had nowhere to go except into the person sitting next to you. Now the second confirmation, because so far this is archaeologists reading objects and reading drifts. The test has to come from the other direction. If the itch really is an engine, then making people bored on purpose should make them build. In 2014, Sandy Mann and a colleague ran that experiment. One group copied numbers out of a telephone directory for 15 minutes, deliberately, punishingly dull. Then everybody was asked to invent as many uses as they could for a plastic cup. The bored group produced more ideas and stranger ones. And the duller the preparation, the bigger the effect. The most passive condition, just reading the numbers, produced the most creative output of all. Now be careful with that. It is one study with a small sample and a plastic cup. It has been argued over, and it should be. But it points in the same direction as a 40,000-year-old flute. An agreement across that kind of gap is worth something. There is a second half of the shock study that nobody quotes. They ran a version at home, with people alone in their own rooms. 32% admitted they had cheated. They picked up a phone, or got up, or found something to do. At home, with no lab coat in sight, a third of people could not manage 15 minutes. The itch is not a fault in the machine. It is the part that makes the machine go looking. Now the contested case, because you should see how thin some of this evidence is. In a cave in Slovenia called Divje Babe, Somebody found the thigh bone of a cave bear with 2 clean, round holes in it. Neanderthal layers, around 60,000 years old. It was announced as the oldest musical instrument on the planet, a Neanderthal flute. The response was fierce. Hyenas crack bones and their teeth punch round holes. Critics matched the spacing to a carnivore jaw and said the case was closed. Others measured the rims, argue the edges show working, and point out that a bite hard enough to punch that bone would have crushed the shaft. I am not resolving that here, and neither is anyone else this year. But notice what the fight is actually about. Nobody disputes that Neanderthals had spare hours. The fight is over whether one of them spent those hours on a tune. So, what ended it? Not the phone. The phone turned up at the very end of a long queue, and it is the smallest item in it. Go in order. First, the clock. Mechanical clocks spread across European towns in the 1300s and 1400s. For the first time, the day was cut into equal pieces that you did not choose. Then the shift. Work becomes hours you have sold to somebody else. What is left over becomes a separate thing, and separate things need names. This is when leisure gets its modern meaning. Then print gets cheap. In the 1830s, a newspaper in New York drops to 1 cent. A weight becomes a filled weight for the price of a coin. Then radio in the 1920s. Sound in a room with nobody else in it. Then television. By around 1960, most households in America and Britain had a set, and the evening slot went to it in under 15 years. Then the screen in your pocket, in 2007. The first one that fits inside a gap of 30 seconds. That is the whole trick, and it is worth saying slowly. Every earlier machine needed you to sit down. Now the bill, in numbers you can check. Global averages put phone use at something like 4.5 hours a day. Total screen time, across all devices, sits closer to 7. Pickup counts vary by method. The careful estimates sit near 60 times a day. The looser ones pass 90. 60 times a day is once every 15 waking minutes. 15 minutes. The same 15 minutes that had a third of a room reaching for a shock button, and the gap has closed at both ends. Most people now reach for a phone within minutes of waking, and hold one in the last minutes before sleep. Then look at what happened inside the screen itself. Studies that record what people actually do on a computer found the average stretch of attention on one thing was about 2.5 minutes in 2004. By 2021, the same measurement gave 47 seconds. 2.5 minutes to 47 seconds, in 17 years. And here's the part that ruins the whole story. We report more boredom, not less. Large surveys in the United States find that most adults hit boredom at least once in any 10-day stretch, and that the youngest groups report the most of it by a wide margin. The alarm did not stop ringing. We stopped acting on it. You can now switch it off without doing anything at all. That option is about 15 years old, and it is the only genuinely new thing in this entire video. Everything else on this list still cost you something. A book takes an hour. A game needs a second player. A story needs somebody willing to tell it. The feed costs nothing and returns nothing. It is the first answer to the alarm that leaves no object behind. So what if the empty hours were never the problem? What if the itch is a search order, and every flute, statue, board game, and ghost story is what a search order looks like when it has nowhere cheap to go? And what if the thing we bought is not entertainment? What we bought is the right to ignore the order. Look at what that reframes. Every generation before yours had the same alarm and no snooze. So they carved, sang, drew, and argued in the dark. Not because they were more creative than you, because they were cornered. You are the first human being who is not cornered. We traded 4 empty hours a day for a feed that never ends, and most of us never even knew it was gone. So go back to those last 10 minutes. Your hand moved. There was nothing new on the phone. You checked anyway. That was the oldest signal you own, filing a request for work. 40,000 years ago, it got a vulture bone and 5 holes. 20,000 years ago, it got a mammoth drum. It is still filing the request. Nobody at your end is reading them. Now I want to hear from you. 2 questions, and the second one is the real one. First, divje babe. Flute or hyena? Pick a side and say why. And second, when were you last bored for a full hour without reaching for anything? Not a cue, an hour. I suspect the answers split this comment section almost exactly by age.